me. So I've been in the industry for quite a long time. I've worked at very large pharma and smaller biotechs, and I've held various roles within our industry. Outside of the industry, I am also an executive coach and a leadership development professional, and so I'm currently a management consultant, which means I spend a lot of time doing executive coaching and working with leadership teams on things exactly like this. How do you manage difficult conversations? How do you have, what strategies do you have for dealing with conflict? And how do you sometimes lean into the uncomfortable? So, I think hopefully I'm well prepared to guide you through today's session. And again, I completely invite you to, share and to ask questions. But you don't need to vote since it's just you and I. You can just tell me. But what we wanted to kind of get a sense of is what really describes your biggest concern when it comes to managing difficult conversations. Is it maybe hurting the other person's feelings or not clearly stating the issue, sort of, beating around the bush before getting to the main point, or being seen as difficult, or maybe something else? Yeah. I mean, I think, that's sort of universally, I think we probably all fit into all of these, right? It's that, we don't want anyone to be sort of floating out there without getting the feedback that they need so that they can be their best selves. But we also, we want to make sure that we're being concise and succinct and delivering the message so that it's clear without hurting their feelings, without being emotional yourself, or being prepared at the same time to handle their emotions should that present itself, right? So it's all just a mixed bag, and most of us tend to be, uncomfortable with conflict or with any lack of harmony, so it makes these types of conversations all the more challenging. Conversations are definitely important, right? We need to have the dialogue, and we need to make sure that we're growing and building, developing our relationships. So Susan Scott said, our work, our relationships, and in fact our very lives succeed or fail gradually, and then suddenly one conversation at a time. So it's just this whole concept of, time goes by so quickly and there's so much busyness that happens that we don't really, realize that really the thing that's spurring us forward every step of the way are the dialogues that we have with folks, right? It's those learning opportunities, those growth opportunities, and those relational moments, right? So it's really important to make the best of the few moments we have with one another so that we're building not only the relationship, but also the person in many ways. So I think, the things that you have mentioned as far as the things that kind of, led you to sign up for this, wanting to make sure that you're being clear without being seen as difficult, is definitely important and one of the things most people can relate to. So when we think about delivering the message and the recipient who's getting it, right? There are three buckets of reactivity that exist. There's the comply, protect, and control. So if we look at comply, it's please, give in, right, and appease and avoid, right? So those are the kinds of words that go with that. It's how do we please someone in this situation? Right? How do we maybe make this okay, make it go away? So that's usually when we give in to things or we appease the other person, right? In protecting, here it's, the reaction that is elicited is of distance, of, being critical, judgmental. So these are things that, tends to be, they trigger others, right? And then with control, it's that whole concept of taking over and being aggressive and then eliciting a reaction based on that behavior. So it's important to realize that when we're having these conversations with folks, particularly if we're providing feedback of some type, that we might be hitting on one of these areas, which makes them react and feel like, oh, I need to really sort of tighten up a little bit, right? Because I need to make a decision in this moment. Do I give in? Do I distance myself from this? Or do I have some sort of an aggressive reaction to it, right? So the thing about, conflict and constructive conversations where conflict may present itself is that we're trying to have this dialogue with someone, and we're concerned at the same time that they're going to take the protect or control position, right? We want them to understand the feedback we're giving or understand the direction we're giving and to comply with it. But in the back of our minds, we're like, please don't be, critical of what I'm saying to you, and please don't overreact or be impatient with me and whatnot, right? So we're concerned about it at the same time that the person who is receiving the feedback or the instruction is also kind of grappling with that. So it's a very messy emotional space, in as much as we try to make it about the work, right? So recognizing that the conflict exists and that it elicits reactions in individuals, the giver and the receiver, there are I went ahead of myself. So before I go into my 5 options for dealing with conflict, let's first check in. Which style of conflict would you say is yours? Do you tend to, when you're when you're the recipient in a conversation where you feel like conflict is emerging, do you feel the need to comply, protect, or control in general? Yeah, I mean, I think that's true for many people, and I think in most situations, right, we would be like, well, I'm not going to get aggressive, and I don't want to be critical of the person who's giving me the feedback, so I think I tend to fall into comply, except in those instances when it's something that really, really matters to you. Right? So I myself completely fall into that appease, give in, I'm sort of like, really, is it worth the fight? And usually the answer is no. However, if it's something that maybe pertains to my kids, I might move into protect mode. And if
Right.
protect mode is kind of landing, right, I might go into control mode, right? I need to take this over because I'm concerned about the impact on my kids. So, you can have one primary tendency and style, but you can also, sometimes flex, right, if necessary. It's situational. And, that I think is the challenging part, because we're thinking, right, and we're trying to think about, okay, what's the right style? What's the right style that I should react with versus what is my emotional reaction to it, right? So it's like the mind and the heart are, you're hoping they're aligned. Sometimes they're at odds, right? So that's when you start feeling sort of your ears getting hot or your temperature rising, or you start feeling like, oh, I feel the aggression building and I'm trying to simmer it down because, I need to remain level-headed, right? And that's usually when people really start struggling with control because it's like, where am I with this? And I'm really heated. And it's interesting because oftentimes you'll start with a conflict or a conversation. Well, you'll start with a conversation that becomes a little bit more of a conflict as it becomes a bit argumentative, and then people start kind of digging their heels in based on their beliefs and their preferences and whatever. And then it's interesting how a topic that could be an easily comply response can move over to protect or control.